Hello and welcome to World Panorama, your favorite show on all the big international news stories that unfolded this week. I am Aishwarya with you. Here's a look at the headlines first. China reports a spike in coronavirus new cases and deaths. WHO attributes spike to broader definition to diagnose. US accuses China of lack of transparency. Focus on floating Petri dishes as coronavirus infects at least 219 people on board Diamond Princess. Cruise vessel kept in quarantine off the port of Yokohama in Japan. "30 people dead, including pregnant woman and baby, as militants set fire on sleeping travelers in Borno state, several abducted. Nigeria re-equips its armed forces for fight against Boko Haram. Concerns grow over humanitarian crisis in Yemen after Houthis impose a 2% levy on aid distributed in the country. World aid agencies mull collective response at a meet in Brussels. And Australia's government lists 113 native animal species needing emergency intervention in order to survive after bushfire crisis. Since September, unprecedented fires have killed at least 1 billion animals in the country. The largest coronavirus outbreak outside mainland China is not in a country but on a cruise ship. Diamond Princess is into a lockdown for more than a week. It was scheduled to dock on 4th of February but is kept in quarantine off the port of Yokohama in Japan. This after one passenger from Hong Kong was found to be infected with the virus. Now, more than 219 people on board the cruise ship, including 2 Indians, have tested positive for coronavirus. The coronavirus spread has put focus on cruise ships that have for years been referred to as floating Petri dishes, places ripe for the exchange of germs and the spreading of illness. Even as coronavirus cases continue to surge in China, the largest virus outbreak outside mainland China has been reported not from a country but a cruise ship. Diamond Princess is into a lockdown for more than a week now. It is kept in quarantine off the port of Yokohama in Japan. This after one passenger from Hong Kong was found to be infected with the virus. Now, more than 218 people on board the cruise ship, including 2 Indians, have tested positive for coronavirus. Those testing positive have been admitted to hospitals, while other passengers have been largely confined to their cabins. Around 3,600 passengers and crew members will be confined to the quarantine ship until at least 19th of February, as tests continue to be carried out. The company is providing extra TV, films, games and newspapers for quarantine passengers, plus room service food.
Japan's Ministry of Health, Labour and Welfare is confirming whether the passengers on board are infected with the virus and then taking measures to send them to hospital by ambulance for treatment.
Cruise ships have actually for years been described as floating Petri dishes, areas ripe for the exchange of bacteria and also the dispersing of health problems. So, not just the Diamond Princess, the MS Westerdam cruise ship is facing the brunt of coronavirus scare, despite no one on board so far testing positive for the virus. The ship had to spend 3 weeks at sea as it was turned away by 5 countries: Japan, Taiwan, Guam, the Philippines and Thailand, over fears that someone aboard may have the coronavirus.
We've been floating around for about 2 weeks now, and many countries have closed their border off to us for fear of the coronavirus. But we have now been isolated for almost 2 weeks and checked regularly for temperatures, and still no sign of any coronavirus. It's so scary to not be able to plan or The unknown is definitely something that evokes fear.
The ship with 1,455 passengers and 802 crew on board was finally welcomed by Cambodia on Thursday to the relief of passengers and the praise of global health agencies.
We're very, very pleased to be in your country. It's good to step on land, and thank you very much for welcoming us. We have a long journey ahead. It'll be good to be home, but the crew and everybody on board has been absolutely marvellous.
On another cruise ship in Hong Kong, World Dream cruise ship, 3,600 passengers were quarantined because of fears that people on board might have the virus. They were only allowed to disembark after tests came back negative.
Everyday staff members came to clean my room and did chores. We are not afraid at all. In fact, the crew member of the cruise ship have done a good job.
Experts say that there is an increased risk of respiratory and gastrointestinal diseases on ships as passengers and crew members from different parts of the world mix intimately and intensely for a short period of time. With coronavirus, which is believed to spread through droplets such as from mucus or saliva, people could be infected without direct contact with a carrier. Besides, crew members often do not change, so they often become agents of transmission. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV. This week saw a spike in coronavirus deaths and new cases being reported from China's Hubei province. China sacked 2 top officials in Hubei province hours after the new figures were released. The new cases and deaths in the province have pushed the national death toll above 1,523, with almost 66,492 infections in total. Now, WHO says that most of this was down to Hubei using a broader definition to diagnose people. However, there are accusations over China's lack of transparency. The final members of a WHO team are expected to arrive in China over the weekend to investigate the epicenter of the outbreak. World health officials are scrambling to determine just how widespread the new coronavirus is. This as Chinese authorities reported a surge in new cases this week. Wednesday was the worst day with 240 new deaths and nearly 15,000 new cases reported in a single day. However, the World Health Organization says spike in cases was mostly because of China using a broader definition to diagnose people. It added that there was also no major shift in the coronavirus's pattern of mortality or severity.
Outside the cases on the Diamond Princess cruise ship, we're not seeing a dramatic increase in transmission outside China. And that is the current picture. We're still saying to governments around the world that we still have an opportunity to prepare for the potential spread of the virus.
Hours after the announcement of the spike in new cases, the Chinese government announced a political shake-up in Hubei. Public anger has swelled over the handling of the virus. This after outpouring of grief over the death of a young doctor who sounded the alarm on the virus and was punished by officials for speaking out. Meanwhile, more medical teams are arriving in Wuhan as China is stepping up severe coronavirus cases treatment. Hubei, which includes the city of Wuhan, where the coronavirus is believed to have originated, has more than 80% of the official cases worldwide.
The doctors are under huge pressure with such a sudden rise in the number of patients. Also, there is still some shortage in medical and protective equipments and materials. But with a clear diagnosis criteria, we can make a definite diagnosis.
While the health authorities have praised China for its wartime measures to combat the coronavirus, concerns remain about the transparency of the data from Chinese authorities. The US has called on Beijing to be more transparent over the outbreak.
You know, it's just not about these GDP numbers. It's about what's happening to the health of the Chinese people. And is the Politburo really being honest with us? And we would prefer, we thought there was going to be more transparency, but we're a bit disappointed. So we'll see how that works.
While China tries to slowly return to work in an effort to keep the economy going, many areas remain paralyzed by the virus. In Shanghai, residents are facing increasingly stringent quarantine measures. One village has banned all outside cars and residents, a measure also adopted in many residential compounds in Beijing. Outside China, one person died in Japan from the virus on Thursday night. Her death brings to 3 the number of fatalities from the virus outside mainland China. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV.
At least 30 people are dead after suspected Boko Haram militants set fire on sleeping travelers in Borno state in Nigeria. The attacks happened in Oro village, about 20 kilometers from the capital, on Sunday night. Now, several people were also abducted. President Muhammadu Buhari has condemned the attack with a promise to crush an insurgency that has bedeviled Nigeria since the year 2009. He also told African Union's Security Council meeting on Monday that his government was working to secure the release of all children and citizens held by the terrorists.
Nigerian military all set for an upgrade. The country's president, Muhammadu Buhari, this week announced that the military will be re-professionalized and re-equipped to meet the growing exigencies of security in the country, assuring citizens that the promise of ending terrorism would soon be realized. This as militant Islamist group Boko Haram and its offshoots continue to wage a brutal insurgency in Nigeria since 2009. On Sunday, suspected Boko Haram militants killed at least 30 people and abducted women and children in a raid in northeastern Nigeria. Most of the victims were travelers who were burned to death while sleeping in their vehicles during an overnight stop. The attack took place in Ono town on a major highway in Borno state.
Even if you kill a single person, any terrorist group, that amounts to a very horrifying act. You cannot differentiate between one or the other. And they have done plenty of them. They have killed many army people, armed forces when they were sleeping or something. They attacked their camps. They kidnapped these women, which is one of the most heinous crimes that they have done it. And the kind of, the indignities they perpetrated on them. So there have been several of them. And most recently just now, these 30 people going in a bus, for no rhyme or reason, just kill them. So similar, this kind of cowardly acts they indulge in.
When President Buhari came to power in 2015, he pledged to defeat the insurgents. Although his troops have made significant progress in weakening the militants, the recent spate of attacks threatens the initial gains. United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres last week appealed to members of the United Nations to channel additional resources to support Nigerian security forces and also the displaced victims of the raging Boko Haram violence. He was speaking at the African Union headquarters in Addis Ababa. The UN chief also met with African leaders as part of the ongoing African Union summit in the Ethiopian capital.
They are operating in different parts of West Africa, including like Chad. They are operating in Cameroon, they are operating in Niger, they are operating in Nigeria itself. So all the neighboring countries they are operating. And they have been losing territory since 2019 because the Nigerian forces have been attacking and they have been just cornering, so are the neighboring country states. So they have been, but recent attack has brought them again onto the fore that they have not yet gone.
So what are the demands of Boko Haram militants? The sect began its deadly campaign in July 2009 following a controversial execution of its fundamentalist leader Muhammad Yusuf. 10 years on, the insurgency has lingered, with its tactics and dynamics also becoming increasingly complex for security agencies to contain. Although the sect began its campaign by targeting civilians, its focus since 2018 has dwelt largely on military assets and humanitarian workers. In March 2018, 4 UN aid workers were killed in a Boko Haram attack in a village in Nigeria's northeastern state of Borno, where the insurgency has been largely concentrated. The attacks had forced the UN and other humanitarian agencies to temporarily pull their staff members from the region. It sometimes took months for some of the aid workers to be returned, further compounding the humanitarian crisis. Security forces have also not been spared of Boko Haram ruthlessness, with Nigerian army alone recording over 2,000 deaths of soldiers in less than 3 years. The decade-long Islamist insurgency in Nigeria has killed about 36,000 people. More than 2 million have been left homeless and hundreds have been abducted in the conflict. The Nigerian government has repeatedly said that the militants have been defeated, but their attacks continue. The violence has spread to neighboring Niger, Chad and Cameroon, prompting a regional military coalition to fight the insurgents. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV.
The European Commission held an emergency meeting in Brussels on Thursday to address the latest crisis in the 5-year-old civil war in Yemen. The rebel Houthi authorities in northern Yemen are obstructing aid by taxing the shipments, threatening millions of people with starvation. Yemen has been driven to the brink of famine during fighting between Iran-based Houthi group based in Sana'a and the Saudi-backed government of President Hadi. Now, in this report, we take a look at the world's biggest humanitarian crisis unfolding in the war-torn country of Yemen. Yemen, a country mired in conflict for the last 6 years. And the horror that is unfolding there has now become the world's humanitarian crisis. And the horror that is unfolding there has now become the world's worst humanitarian crisis. More than 23,000 fatalities were reported in 2019. Thousands more civilians died from malnutrition, disease and poor health. About 80% of the population, which is about 24 million people, need humanitarian assistance and protection. The United Nations says that some 20 million people need help securing food. Half of them considered one step away from famine. The war has also displaced more than 3.65 million from their homes.
But today, a wind of madness is sweeping the globe. From Libya to Yemen to Syria and beyond, escalation is back. Arms are flowing and offensives are increasing. All situations are different, but there is a feeling of growing instability and hair-trigger tensions, which makes everything far more unpredictable and uncontrollable, with a heightened risk of miscalculation.
Look at this bombed-out building in the port city of Hodeidah that has become the main front of Yemen's war. The dash-strewn pools have become perfect breeding ground for mosquitoes. More and more cases of dengue fever are being reported here, and people are dying due to want of medical attention.
Well, in 2019, there was more than 76,000 suspected cases of dengue across Yemen, with 271 associated deaths. When it comes to areas that are most affected, the governorate of Hodeidah has been seeing, for example, 70% of all alerts end of 2019. So this is the area that is the most affected, and at the same time, it's an area of active fighting.
Last week, flights carrying patients needing urgent medical attention began from the Yemeni capital Sana'a. One of the measures that United Nations had been trying, and breakthrough coming after 2 years of negotiations, as Sana'a airport has been closed to civilian flights since 2015. 15-year-old Abdullah Abed was one of the 16 patients to be flown out on the first flight to Amman.
He has been suffering from kidney failure for past 5 years, and there isn't treatment in Yemen. They don't do transplants in Yemen. He has been suffering from kidney failure for past 5 years, and there isn't treatment in Yemen. They don't do transplants in Yemen.
Supervised by the United Nations and the World Health Organization, flights from Sana'a will go to Amman and Cairo. The majority of the patients are those suffering from cancers or needing organ transplants and reconstructive surgeries. Although the Houthis control Sana'a airport, access is restricted by the Saudi-led coalition, which controls the airspace.
There are literally thousands of patients who need this care. This is the first flight. There will be more. The solution is to end the war and to open the airport in Sana'a so the Yemeni civilians and their families can travel wherever they need to go in order to get the help that they need.
Yemen has been embroiled in conflict since 2014 when Iran-aligned Houthis ousted the government of President Mansour Hadi. A Saudi-led military coalition intervened in 2015 to try to restore Hadi. The coalition has been receiving logistical and intelligence support from the US, UK and France. Saudi-led coalition has driven the Houthis out of Aden and much of the south of the country. As a result, Hadi's government has established a temporary home in Aden. But it struggles to provide basic services and security, and the president continues to be based in Saudi Arabia. The Houthis, meanwhile, have not been dislodged from Sana'a and northwestern Yemen. They maintain a siege of the city of Taiz and launch regular ballistic missile and drone attacks on Saudi Arabia. Meanwhile, the civilians continue to remain in the line of fire. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV. The week saw heavy downpour across Australia's east coast. While there was widespread storm damage, the rains brought relief after months of devastating bushfires and years of drought. As Australia continues to rebuild after massive bushfire devastation, it has now identified 113 animal species that need emergency help. Australian government's instituted panel has found some highly threatened species facing imminent risk of extinction because almost all of their habitat has been destroyed. The government's panel will also next bring out a list of plant species that need help.
Huge waves and foam, sweeping beach in Sydney. This as storm brought rain and deluge to the city on Monday. The 4-day downpour across Australia's east coast led houses to be inundated and roads flooded. But the rain also doused some bushfires across the country's most populous state of New South Wales. Some rural areas received more rain in recent days than they had in the entirety of the past year. A turnaround from the bushfires that have killed 33 people and ravaged large parts of the east coast.
We actually have 723 firefighters still in the field of operations. They're dealing with 38 fires, 19 uncontained. But the rainfall has obviously providing some welcome relief to many of the bushfires that have been raging.
Australia's wildfires have burned through an area the size of Greece since September. Researchers have estimated that more than 1 billion animals may have perished in the fires. Now Australia has identified 113 animal species, which will need urgent help after their numbers and habitats were devastated by recent bushfires. The list released by country's Environment Ministry on Tuesday narrowed a field of hundreds of fire-affected species to those needing the most urgent conservation action. Koalas and wallabies, as well as bird, fish and frog species are among those needing the most help. Almost all species on the list have lost at least 30% of their habitat due to the mammoth blazes.
But when I was a little boy, I loved bears, and when I came to Australia, this was the closest thing to a bear I could see. And when we moved into forested areas, we started to see more and more wombats, and I was curious, so I read and learned everything I could about them.
Not just animal species, there are plant species that also need help. While several plant species survived the wildfires, others were not so lucky. Plant species are expected to be named in the next update of the list. Last month, Australia pledged $50 million Australian dollars to wildlife and habitat recovery. Money will be spent on animal treatment, food drops and pest animal control programs. Australia has sought Britain's help in protecting its plants and trees. British scientists are helping in emergency seed collection and storing precious specimens so that the seeds of plant species considered rare or threatened can be banked and conserved for the future.
The current initiative is to get out to the field in Australia and look at remnant patches of vegetation after the fire season is finished. and see what we can conserve from those areas and what we can conserve from areas that might be in threat going forward. We also want to better understand what threatened species have already been affected.
As rain pour over the east coast region, the once blackened bushlands have started to turn green. New growth beginning to push through the scorched landscape. Greenery that brings optimism of a better future for Australian people and its wildlife. But recovery from unprecedented fire season will take time and efforts from the government. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV.
And here is a look at some more international news stories in Global Buzz. At least 14 people have drowned when a boat carrying Rohingya refugees sank off the south coast of Bangladesh. The boat was destined for Malaysia and included Rohingya refugees from camps in Bangladesh. All of the dead bodies recovered are reportedly of women and children. 70 people were rescued. The boat capsized in the Bay of Bengal near St. Martin's Island. Bernie Sanders narrowly won New Hampshire's Democratic presidential primary on Tuesday, solidifying his front-runner status in the White House race and dealing a setback to moderate rival Joe Biden, who finished in a disappointing 5th place. Moderate Pete Buttigieg finished a close second after edging out Sanders in last week's chaotic and disputed first nominating contest in Iowa. The race next moves to Nevada caucuses on 22nd of February. And a Pakistani anti-terrorism court sentenced Hafiz Saeed, the founder of the Lashkar-e-Toiba terrorist group, to 5.5 years in prison in a case related to terrorism financing. Hafiz Saeed was convicted and sentenced on 2 counts by the court in Lahore on Wednesday. He was sentenced to 6 months imprisonment for being a member of a proscribed organization under Pakistani law and another 5 years for a charge related to illegal property. New Delhi has described Hafiz Saeed's sentencing as a long-pending international obligation of Pakistan to put an end to the support for terrorism. And before we take your leave, take a look at this beard and moustache competition at a bar in Belarus. Over 90 men from 12 countries came together to pick the best in several categories: corporate, casual, and of course hipster. The atmosphere in the bar was intense as the participants showed off their assets to a cheering crowd. It was also a contest that was also about making friends and contestants swapping tips on how to keep their beards soft and tidy. Time to wrap up the program. I'll see you next week in another edition of World Panorama. See you then. Bye-bye.